The Cameronians was a rifle regiment of the British Army, the only regiment of rifles amongst the Scottish regiments of infantry. It was formed in 1881 under the Childers reforms by the amalgamation of the 26th Cameronian Regiment and the 90th Perthshire Light Infantry. In 1968, when reductions were required, the regiment was the only regiment that decided to disband rather than amalgamate with another regiment. It can trace its roots to that of the Cameronians, later the 26th of Foot, who were raised in 1689. The 1881 amalgamation coincided with the Cameronians' selection to become the new Scottish Rifles. History. The Cameronians was formed in 1881 under the Childers reforms by the amalgamation of the 26th Cameronian Regiment and the 90th Perthshire Light Infantry. After the amalgamation, the 1st Battalion preferred to be known as the Cameronians, while the 2nd preferred to be known as the Scottish Rifles. The 2nd Battalion saw action at the Battle of Spinkop in January 1900 during the Second Boer War. A 3rd Militia Battalion was embodied in May 1900 for service during the Second Boer War. More than 600 men embarked for South Africa in April 1901, and returned in June 1902, following the end of hostilities. First World War. Regular Army. The 1st Battalion landed at Le Havre as part of the 19th Brigade, which was an independent command at the time. In August 1914 for service on the Western Front, the battalion famously refused to play football or otherwise fraternize with the enemy on Christmas Day 1914. The 2nd Battalion landed in France as part of the 23rd Brigade in the 8th Division in November 1914 for service on the Western Front. Territorial Force. The 1/5th Battalion landed at Le Havre as part of the 19th Brigade in the 6th Division in November 1915 for service on the Western Front. The 1/6th Battalion landed at Le Havre as part of the 23rd Brigade in the 8th Division in March 1915 for service on the Western Front. The 1/7th Battalion and the 1/8th Battalion landed in Gallipoli as part of the 156th Brigade in the 52nd Division in June 1915 after evacuation from Gallipoli in January 1916. The battalions moved to Egypt and then landed at Marseille in April 1918 for service on the Western Front. New armies. The 9th Battalion landed at Boulogne-sur-Mer as part of the 27th Brigade in the 9th Division in May 1915 for service on the Western Front. The 10th Battalion landed at Boulogne-sur-Mer as part of the 46th Brigade in the 15th Division in July 1915 for service on the Western Front. The 11th Battalion landed at Boulogne-sur-Mer as part of the 77th Brigade in the 26th Division in September 1915 for service on the Western Front, but sailed for Salonika in November 1915. Interwar. The 1st Battalion was deployed to Ireland in 1919 during the Irish War of Independence and then went to India in 1931, while the 2nd Battalion was deployed to Mesopotamia in 1919 and then went to India in 1922. Second World War. The 1st Battalion, which had been in India at the start of the war, was deployed to Burma as part of the 1st Burma Brigade in the 39th Indian Division in 1942 and saw action in the Burma Campaign. The 2nd Battalion was deployed to France as part 13th Infantry Brigade in the 5th Division within the British Expeditionary Force in September 1939, and, after taking part in the Dunkirk evacuation in June 1940, saw action in the Allied invasion invasion of Sicily in July 1943 and the Allied invasion of Italy in September 1943 and, after the Normandy landings in June 1944, took part in the Northwest Europe campaign in late 1944 and in 1945. The 6th Battalion and the 7th Battalion, both Territorial Army battalions, were deployed to France as part of the 156th Infantry Brigade in the 52nd Infantry Division to provide cover for the withdrawal of troops of the British Expeditionary Force after the Normandy landings in June 1944. The battalion took part in the Northwest Europe campaign in late 1944 and in 1945. The 9th Battalion took part in the Normandy landings as part of the 46th Infantry Brigade in the 15th Infantry Division in June 1944 and saw action in the Northwest Europe campaign in late 1944 and in 1945. Post-war, in 1948, along with every other infantry regiment of the British Army, the Cameronians was reduced to a single regular battalion. The 1st Battalion, which had been repeatedly decimated in the Burma campaign, was placed in suspended animation and the 2nd Battalion was renamed the 1st. It was deployed to Malaya in 1950 during the Malayan emergency, under the reforms of the Army in the 1967 Defense White Paper, which saw several regiments amalgamated. The Cameronians chose to disband rather than amalgamate with another in the Lowland Brigade. The 1st Battalion, the Cameronians, was disbanded on 14 May 1968 at Douglas Castle, near Douglas, South Lanarkshire, in the presence of the Duke of Hamilton, the Earl of Angus. Its recruiting area in Lanarkshire and Dumfries and Galloway taken over by the King's Own Scottish Borderers, and the regimental headquarters finally closed in 1987. Traditions. Every new member of the regiment was issued a Bible as a nod to Richard Cameron, after whom the original 26th Foot was named, and the regiment mounted an armed guard at the doors of the kirk during religious services. Soldiers wore a rifle green doublet with Douglas Tartan-Trurs as part of the full dress and number 1 dress uniforms. Battle honours. The regiment's battle honours included Early Wars, Blenheim, Ramillies, Oudenarde, Malplaquet, South Africa 1846–72, South Africa 1877–892, Relief of Ladysmith, South Africa 1899–1902, The Great War, Mons, Locato, Retreat from Mons, Mon 1914–18, in 1914, Le Basset 1914, Massy 1914, Armentières 1914, Neuve Chapelle, Aubers, Luz, Somme 1916–18, Albert 1916, Bazenton, Pozières, Flers, Courcelette, Le Transloy, Ancre Heights, Arras 1917–18, Scarpa 1917–18, Arleux, Ypres 1917–18, Pilcombe, Longyearbyen 1917, Menin Road, Polygon Wood, Passchendaele, St. Quentin, Rosiers, Havre, Lys, Hazebrouck, Bailleul, Kemmel, Scherpenberg, Sossenau URCQ, Drocourt Queant, Hindenburg Line, EPE Acute HY, Canal du Nord, St. Quentin Canal, Cambrai 1918, Courtrai, Selle, Samba, France and Flanders 1914–18, Doran 1917–18, Macedonia 1915–18, Gallipoli 1915–16, Romania, Egypt 1916–17, Gaza, El Moghab, Nebi Samuel, Jaffa, Palestine 1917–18. Second World War. Ypres, Camins Canal, Oden, Schucon, Montpincon, Astrie, Naderain, West Scheldt, South Beveland, Joalteren, Causeway, Aston, Roa, Rhineland, Reichswald, Moyland, Rhine, Dreerwalde, Bremen, Artlemberg, Northwest Europe 1940, 44-45, landing in Sicily, Simeto Bridgehead, Sicily 1943, Garigliano Crossing, Anzio, advance to Tiber, Italy 1943-44, Pegu 1942, Ponged, Yeneguiong 1942, Chindits 1944, Burma 1942-44. Affiliations included Canada, the Perth Regiment 1965, Canada. Australia 26th Battalion 1928-1951, Australia. New Zealand, the Otago and Southland Regiment 1948-1968, New Zealand. South Africa, the Witwatersrand Rifles 1937-1961, South Africa. Ghana, 2nd Battalion, Ghana Regiment, Ghana, United Kingdom. 7th Duke of Edinburgh Zone Gurkha Rifles 1951-1968, United Kingdom. Notable former members of the regiment. See also category Cameronians officers and category Cameronian soldiers. After the Second World War, the regiment gave rise no fewer than 13 officers of Major General rank or above: General Sir Thomas Riddle Webster, General Richard O'Connor, General Sir Horatius Murray, General Sir Roy Bucker, Lieutenant General Sir John Fullerton Evetts, Lieutenant General Sir Alexander Galloway, Lieutenant General Sir George Collingwood, Major General Robin Money, Major General Douglas Graham, Major General James Hoare, Major General Eric Smith, Major General John Dutton Frost, Major General Henry Templar Alexander. Also His Majesty Sultan Qaboos, the ruler of the Sultanate of Oman, served with the Cameronians as a junior officer. The Cameronians Museum. The Cameronians Museum is located within the Low Parks Museum, Hamilton, South Lanarkshire. Memorials. Face 5 of the British Memorial on Spion Kop lists the names of the soldiers from the Cameronians who died at the Battle of Spion Kop during the Second Boer War. The Cameronians War Memorial in Kelvin Grove Park, Glasgow, by Philip Lindsay Clark, unveiled on the 9th of August 1924, depicts men of the regiment manning a Lewis gun, a monument commemorating both the founding of the regiment by the Earl of Angus in 1689 and its disbanding in 1968, can be found at Douglas, South Lanarkshire. Also within the village is a statue of the Earl of Angus to commemorate the bicentenary of the raising of the regiment.